Hey everybody, I'm Ruben from SUPboarder and I'm here to talk you through a brand new series that we're going to be doing, and it's going to be getting you into downwinding. 3-part series. This video, the first video, is going to be starting you off with really the basics, understanding what downwinding is, what equipment you need, and how to do it safely at a very low level. Now, we're not going to be just using full-on, nice, more specific downwind boards like these. We're going to be talking about it using an ice up, getting you going on the first time, just on basic boards as well, and explaining what is the difference between a more of a downwind specific board and your general mid of the range 10.5 ice up. So after this video, remember to keep an eye out for the next 2 videos in this series, which way we're going to be going on the sort of first downwinder that we would sort of recommend, and then the third video, the final video, which is going to be basically taking you up a grade and sort of talking about the more adventurous downwinder you can do, more of the open sea conditions, and actually talking about the good things about it and the things that can go wrong to make sure you're aware of all of the stuff to be as safe when you're paddling downwind. So let's start off with the super basic thing. What is downwinding? Well, downwinding, as it sort of explains in the title, is basically moving downwind, maybe with swell and open ocean waves as well, from one location to another location. And ideally, that is directly downwind. So it doesn't really involve any upwind paddling or really any sort of crosswind paddling, but sometimes it can involve a slight bit of crosswind paddling to get back to the location you want to get off, or maybe even your start location. But most of the time, it's involving paddling and moving downwind. So because of that, it can be very effortless and easy to do. Sometimes you don't even have to paddle at all. It's just getting blown with the wind in that direction. And now obviously the windier it is, the faster you're going to move. But then at the same time, the windier it is, maybe the more swell or chop or waves there will be forming on that lake, estuary or sea state out there. So bear in mind that if you maybe want to start off your first time, maybe you want to start, if you're a bit cautious, maybe you want to start off with a really small amount of wind and just get the logistics of going from one point to another sorted. The next thing to look at is where can you go downwinding. Now the beauty about downwinding is you can do it pretty much anywhere, from a relatively small river, waterway, maybe only 20, 30 feet wide, to a larger estuary, to a huge lake, to big open ocean crossings. It doesn't have to be just about paddling in shorts in some massive swell, because that is quite a dangerous side of the sport. You're open there, you're stuck out there in the elements, you've got tide, you've got different weather conditions to consider. They're the sort of things that downwinders should aspire to, and it's the sort of level you should be looking towards. But when you start off, let's look at something a little bit calmer. Maybe a river, a lake or an estuary is an ideal place to start downwinding. Now, to actually go downwinding, you really need to be paddling with a friend or a buddy. You can do it on your own, but it does sort of limitate you a lot with the safety and the logistics of getting in and out of the water. Because in an ideal location, you would have a car park or an area where you'd be parked or dropped off at the top of a paddling location, and you'd be paddling directly downwind to another car park or pickup point downwind from that location. If there's 2 of you paddling, it's fantastic because you can then take one car to the bottom location, you can get all your boards onto the top of the other car, and you can drop off at the top location and leave that car or vehicle there. And that way then you can paddle down together, which is way safer, and then you've got the car at the bottom location. And the logistics of paddleboarding, so working out the car drop-offs and where you want to park, is sometimes the hardest bit. And we're going to go over a bit more of that in part 2 of the video, so look out for that one. So let's talk about the equipment needed to go downwinding safely and have as much fun as possible on the water. Now, boards. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you you have to be downwinding on a lovely SIC bullet 14 foot like this. You can go out, especially on the first few times you do it, and use an ice up. In fact, I would encourage you to use a board that you know how to paddle and you're really comfortable on. But at the same time, I'm also not going to say that there isn't a huge difference between paddling a board like this 14-foot bullet and this 14-foot RS down there, compared to your general 10.6 ice up. It is a massive difference in speed and directional glide, and actually ease of use as well. The basic principle is you want to be moving as fast as possible downwind, and ideally, if there's any little bumps or waves, you want to be riding those bumps as waves to help you generate speed and go faster downwind. Now, the longer the board, the thinner the board, the easier it is to catch and ride bumps, and also for the wind to push you downwind. So if you're using your 10'6" inflatable, it's going to work. There's still going to be windage on your body because you're standing up, so you're going to get blown with the wind. And it really works well where there's more wind and less chop. Let's say as soon as the board starts to ride waves and starts to want to catch waves, you will find a longer board, a more sort of all-round touring downwind based board like these two here. They will catch waves way easier and they'll be easier to control. So do not for one moment think you need to have a downwinding board to start downwinding. That is complete rubbish. You need to go and experience the feeling of getting downwinding on whatever board you've got, as long as it's safe and as long as you feel comfortable on paddling that board. But as you see when we talk about using these boards more in the other videos, you will see there is a big difference between the 10'6" and your longer traditional based downwind boards. Now moving away from boards and talking about paddles. Now paddles is definitely even simpler again. Use the paddle you've got as long as it's safe and strong enough. You don't need to have a certain carbon paddle, you don't need to have a certain lightweight, super profile blade. It just needs to be safe and something you're comfortable with paddling with. Definitely when you start moving faster on your board, because when you start downwinding you will probably be moving faster than you've ever paddled your iSUP or your general all-round board ever before, and then you have to increase your cadence. You might have heard of that word before, which is where they mean increase your paddle stroke, the repetition of your paddle stroke, and having a carbon paddle is obviously going to be way easier to do that, but it's still going to work with an aluminium or glass paddle. You just want to be confident with your paddle and know your paddle, and maybe you've paddled with it for a few years or a few seasons and you know that you've put it in a lot of work and it hasn't broken or had any damage, because you don't really want to be going into a downwind situation and having a broken paddle. But we're going to be talking about that a bit later on and how you get out of those situations if they do happen. And just to cut in on sort of paddle heights and blade sizes, just use the same paddle height as you're pretty much paddling. You don't want to go anything too short, but then if you're used to paddling a shorter paddle and you find you get more power out of that, just stick with what you know and how you've already used it. Again, just use the paddle you're confident with and you're used to. So moving away from the boards and paddle, which are the things we need to use to go downwinding, let's talk about the safety stuff, which really cannot be missed out. The big one, which you sort of know we're going to talk about, is your leash. An absolute must, okay? Do not go paddleboarding, downwinding without a leash. Full stop. If you do and you fall off, your board will be moving at a rapid rate away from you and you will not be able to swim and catch up with it, especially if you're in a sort of proper downwind situation, maybe when the wind is 20 knots, 35 miles an hour. It's going to be moving and that board will go. It will move. So please always wear a leash. And in fact, what we recommend really is taking 2 leashes. That's how I recommend it. I always take a coiled leash and wear a coiled leash fixed onto your back leg, or you can have it fixed onto your back leg just below the knee, which some riders prefer, so as if they're walking around the board, it doesn't get in their way so much. A coiled leash stays out of the water, doesn't drag on any seaweed, and it is the best type of leash for this sort of downwinding, and you'll see racers using it as well. But I also take a spare leash with me. I take a standard non-coiled leash wrapped up in a small circle so it's nice and compact, and I clip this on my belt, which we'll talk about later on. But I take a spare leash with me for 2 reasons, and that is A, if you ever need to tow anybody, to make somebody, maybe they're in trouble or they hurt themselves, you can move together as a group. And also it's a spare leash. Now I have been in situations where I've seen a leash break but somebody has got the board. Now okay, if you're on your own and your leash breaks and you can't get to your board but you've got your spare leash, it's not ideal obviously, but it's better to have a spare leash and prepare yourself for what could happen, and when it's there you've got that extra tow line just in case you need it. Moving on to personal flotation devices. Now I'm going to advise you this as it's up to your discretion. I would strongly recommend these sort of waist PFDs. They are really great, they don't take any space, and they are life jackets in there if you need them. Yes, if you fall in, you knock yourself out, these sort of things aren't going to save your life because you've got to inflate them and put them on. But let's be realistic about these sort of things here. They're there as an emergency when, if ever, it all turns and goes Pete Tong, as we would say. You can put this on, it's nice and bright, it's going to keep your neck out of the water, great to have, great peace of mind, and it doesn't limit you at all when you're paddling. You have got the normal sort of buoyancy aids you can wear as well. Again, maybe when you start off, wear a buoyancy aid, or you could even have one under your bungees there just in case. Buoyancy aids are great at keeping you warm, but they do tend to suffer your movement, and you will feel you have a bit of rub. And to be honest, once you've done your first downwinder, if you've worn one, then you take it off, you'll feel the way less restrictive and you probably won't wear it again. So if you end up getting into downwinding, definitely well worth investing in a PFD, a waist one. Great, really neat, compact, and they are super safe and they're there. Now before we move on to some more safety stuff, this is just a point I want to bring in here. Me talking about safety and all the equipment you need is not meant to scare you, okay? Downwinding is a very simple, easy thing to do, and the chances are you'll probably never ever need any of this sort of stuff, but it's better to be prepared, and it's also better to be aware of the risks before you go into something like that. And that's something like this video is really going to be trying to do. It's going to make you aware of the problems that could happen and how you get out of them, and the stuff you would carry to get out of that situation. So just bear that in mind. I'm not trying to scare you. You're probably never going to use this stuff, but it's better to have it and know how to use it. So let's look at some other equipment that keeps you safe and definitely dry and warm in this case. Let's have a look at the clothing you would wear. Now this all depends on what country you're in, how long you're paddling for, what the weather is like. Let's be realistic again about really what sort of danger you might be in. If you're going to be doing a 15-minute paddle, or let's say it's a half an hour paddle, you've paddled it before, it's a one-way trip, but you're doing it when it's windy, you might do it in 10 minutes. So if you fall off 15 times or you swim all the way and end up getting wet, how cold are you going to get? Think about what's the worst case could happen again. But don't overdress for the situation. That's the last thing you want to be doing, is too hot and just really fatiguing yourself through extra heat in your body. Wearing a wetsuit that's too thick is a real problem. Wetsuits are great, but you definitely want to err on the thinner side of the wetsuit. Definitely if you're in colder countries like up here in Europe, we like even a 3-2 base wetsuit in the winter with a sort of spray top is a better option than doing a 5-3 winter based wetsuit where the water's really cold, because you are going to be using a lot of energy. Obviously if the water's warmer and it's sunny and you're in a hot country, pair of shorts is fine, but bear in mind you might have to keep some UV off you. You might want to be wearing a long sleeve rash vest. A hat's always a good idea. Just have a think about it. Think about what you would normally paddle in, and then maybe take one extra thing that you could strip off. Like what I said, a windproof top is really great because then you can tie it around your waist if you need to. And again, if it's producing windage, that's a good thing. It's the reverse of normal SUP, when actually windage and drag can be a bit of a problem. So clothing, it's up to your discretion. Really think about it. Think of what you're going to be comfortable paddling in, and think about what's going to keep you warm. Maybe at the other end you're getting picked up by somebody and they're not there yet, they're half an hour late, or their car's got a flat tire. Think about that sort of thing as well. Have you got something, a lightweight cag or cagoule you can put on just to keep you warm and keep the wind off you when you're at your location. Moving on to other safety equipment that's definitely worth taking: a mobile phone in a dry bag, absolutely, or a VHF radio. You've got to have some way of contacting the shore, the land, the person who's picking you up, whatever. You've got to have some way of means of contacting those people. And of course then you can log your paddle, you can geo-sup your paddle, you can share your paddle with mates, you can do all that sort of stuff too. So a mobile phone in a dry bag is great. And also, like these sort of palm PFDs here, they've got big pockets in the front there, so you can get your mobile phone in the front and you got your PFD as well. So it's great. So it's nothing too big, you don't need an extra bag for it. If you're going on a slightly longer paddle, obviously you want to make sure that you're fully hydrated, but you might want to take a small bottle of water on the board, or sometimes you can take a light camel pack backpack. I wouldn't really want to be taking too much on you because you are going to be wanting to move around, and actually you want to be storing stuff on your board definitely up at the front area, not really anywhere in the mid to the back of the board, because you are going to end up walking up and down the board to try and trim the board as best as possible. So there is going to be areas for you to take stuff, but you don't want to be taking that much. Maybe an energy bar is great, fits down in the sleeve of your wetsuit or inside the front pouch of your PFD, just to keep those energy levels up. But again, think about how far you're paddling, think about how long it should take and what sort of stuff you may need for that paddle. So there we go, there's a few things you should take just for your peace of mind, and actually make you aware that if something does happen, you're ready for it, because it's always better to be like that. But the best thing you can take downwind paddleboarding with you is a friend, a buddy, a paddle partner, for a number of reasons. One is it's fun and it's always a better laugh, especially if you're very evenly matched in speed. That's ideal because you'll be egging each other on, trying to catch little waves, seeing who's paddling fastest downwind. The other reason is then the logistics of car sharing is done. Easier to just involve two people who both go paddling, apart from one person who has to just drive the car all day while other people go paddling. So by that way it's more fun, it's better, both of you get to enjoy the experience. It's way safer obviously. If something happens then your buddy's there to help you, and there's two of you standing up in the water moving along. It looks like you are actually meant to be out there together having fun and as a group. From people standing as passers-by on the riverbank, on the beach, when they see people paddling, if there's two people together, both standing up, moving downwind, they're much less likely to worry and panic about calling the authorities and sort of saying, hey, what is going on? And I don't really want to start covering that now, but there is an option of calling the authorities, the Coast Guard, the RNLI before you go out paddling. Definitely in open sea states and big seas and oceans, but we'll talk about that in the later videos. So moving back onto paddling with a buddy. Now the most important thing when you're paddling with a buddy or a group of friends is you are going to have to paddle to the speed of the slowest paddler. It's very, very important because it's very easy for you to get blown and be 200 meters 300 meters apart, and then suddenly if that person gets a bit fatigued or falls off, then it's 400 meters, and the gap does increase very quickly when you're downwinding. So you really have got to be aware that you've got to paddle to the slowest person. Maybe if you're moving ahead too quickly, just drop to your knees. You can still catch a few bumps and go downwind, but obviously they're going to be moving quicker because they've got more windage. So it's a really big tip that please paddle to the slowest person's ability, to the slowest speed of the group, which then means, yes, you might be limiting your downwind session to not as fast and not as quick to the end point, but you're doing it safely, and then it only helps them, that person, maybe try and paddle a bit quicker, or encourages them to stay with you as a group. It's much safer, much better, and definitely again from the shore and people seeing you, it's easier to see two paddlers paddling together than one standing on their own. So there we go, there's a load of information in that video of the stuff you should have, could have, and have to have when you go downwinding for the first time. Look out for the second video in this series, which is where we're going to be going on a river estuary downwinder. We're going to be doing it as a sort of blog style. We're going to be talking about logistics of putting the car there, going to a location, talking about the problems that could happen, why we're choosing that location because of the wind, all the sort of stuff you would need to do that paddle yourself. And hopefully after that video, then you'll know and you think, I feel confident to go with a friend and do an estuary river downwinder, because it is great fun and it is super safe as long as you're aware of all the risks and how to have the best fun when the wind's blowing next time.